What is up, guys? I am Dad the Critic, and welcome to my channel. I'm going to be reviewing stuff from the perspective of a parent, and then also as a grown man that is subjected to content that is aimed to please children. So if you're into that sort of thing, cool, I'm glad you're here. Today we're going to talk about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Mutant Mayhem. And I have to say up front that this review is spoiler-free. Just keep that in mind if you have reservations. You're good here. I'm a huge Turtles fan. I have been since I was a kid, so I was really excited about this one. And overall, I would say we loved it. The kids loved it. I thought it was a good time. It was family friendly, a lot more family friendly than I expected it to be, actually. And especially coming from Seth Rogen, right? His name is all over this thing. He was a co-writer. He didn't direct it, but he co-wrote it. It's basically his movie is the way they're marketing it. I was expecting there to be quite a bit of sort of subliminal, raunchy jokes and humor in there. And there really wasn't any. And that was a really pleasant surprise. That stuff is pervasive, I think, in modern family movies, kids movies, where there's always got to be a few adult jokes thrown in that go over the kids' heads, and you know, mom and dad can kind of nudge each other or whatever. This movie didn't really have any of that, and I, for one, welcome that. I kind of get tired of that style of humor unless it's done really well, but I think it's overdone, and I think this was a movie that was truly made for kids, which is not what I was expecting. And it's only rated PG, it's not PG-13, so you know, that's probably another reason. The only other thing in that regard, in terms of like language and jokes and stuff, from a parent perspective, is the main villain in the movie. His name is Superfly, and he's this giant mutated fly played by Ice Cube. And, you know, when I was 15 and I watched Friday, I thought that was the funniest movie ever. So hearing Ice Cube do the voice of Superfly was good, but I was always on guard because I'm used to Friday, you know, going off with his mouth. And there were a few times he cussed, and it's mostly like damn and hell and things like that. He did at one point say something like, "That pisses me off," but it wasn't too bad, and neither of my kids reacted strongly. But in this movie, I thought it was great. The movie itself moved along at a pretty good pace. It held my kids' attention for most of it. About 3/4 of the way through, you know, we're in the theater, and they started getting a little fidgety in their seats, like driving me crazy with those damn icy cups. You know, the dome lid with the straw, and every time you move it, it like scratches and squeaks. Giving myself goosebumps talking about it. I hate that sound. My kids are like messing with the straw, like scratching their icy, and they're slurping, and it's all stuck at the bottom. And I'm like, stop it, like watch the movie. And then the other kids like wanting popcorn, and they're crunching it and dropping it everywhere. I'm like, don't make a mess. They probably went the first hour of the movie without any of that stuff bugging me. So that's pretty good, right? I mean, kids get restless anyway. Of all the Turtles movies, I think this one was the one that kids will relate to the most. At this point, if you've seen or read anything about this movie, you know they're touting it as the first real movie where the Turtles are represented as teenagers. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Traditionally, they've kind of been written almost as adults with some immaturity, and they've always been portrayed by adults. And this time they're actually portrayed by teenage boys, which is awesome. It really shines through. Their personalities shine through, and I thought that was fantastic. But because they treat the Turtles as teenagers, this isn't really a superhero movie, which was not what I was expecting, but also a pleasant surprise. And from a parent perspective, that's nice, because it's almost more like a slice of life, coming of age sort of thing, right? Where it's about the Turtles like being boys and feeling like outcasts and just trying to come to terms with society and them being isolated in the sewers and stuff. And also obviously being mutants, but prejudice and feeling like a social outcast. You could replace the Turtles in the movie or the mutants in the movie with any sort of human characters, any sort of minority, and the core, the crux of the story still holds up. It still works. I mean, yes, there's still, you know, ninjas and they fight and stuff, but the whole point of the story is very grounded and real, and you know, it's about acceptance. And I think that's fantastic. There's some really good messaging in there that's not fed to you with a spoon. It's really nice and works itself out in an organic way, which I thought was fantastic. Again, not a superhero movie, but I don't think kids maybe necessarily know the difference because they see mutants fighting each other, and that's exciting. But as a parent, I thought it was a pleasant surprise there as well. And finally, going back to the humor for a minute, My kids and I were laughing at almost all of the same parts, and a lot of kids movies will have adult humor kind of mixed with kids humor, and this felt like it was all very evenly targeted, and the humor was neutral enough that everyone could appreciate it. And I thought that was fantastic, because I don't usually laugh at the same stuff my kids do, and to be able to experience that and hear them laughing at the same things I'm laughing at in this movie was a really cool experience for me as a dad. Man, my throat's drying out. I need a drink. Jack Daniels. Whiskey for wisdom. All right, I think that wraps it up from the dad view, so now let's talk about the critic view. So what did I think of this movie as a grown man? Well, first I have to say, visually, this movie is the most amazing CG movie I've ever seen, artistically and technically speaking. I was blown away with it. You could pause on any frame of this movie and it looks like a masterpiece painting. I followed the lead character designer on Instagram. His name's Woodrow Wright. Highly recommend you guys check him out. Every part of this movie looks like something that was torn from his sketchbook. It's fantastic. But to be fair, if I'm going to say this is the most amazing CG movie I've ever seen, I have to admit that I've never seen either of the Spider-Verse movies. What? Which I know is probably gonna make a lot of people mad. My kids have watched them. I've walked in the room while they're on, but I've never taken the time to sit down and watch. And I love Spider-Man, so I really don't have an excuse as to why I haven't watched them, but someday I will. You know, I mentioned earlier that I'm a die-hard Turtles fan. I grew up with the Turtles, the 80s cartoon when I was a kid. I loved it. I was very heavily involved in Turtles Mania, and I've seen every Turtles TV show and movie up until this point, read a lot of the comics, and this movie is not my Turtles, but I'm okay with it. The Turtles in this movie, like I said, are portrayed as teenagers, and I think this is a perfect execution of sort of passing the torch to a new generation. You don't have to keep rebooting the Turtles and keeping the original audience in mind. I do appreciate when people do that, but it's time for the Turtles. It's time for the Turtles to find a new home with a new generation. Critically, from my perspective, I'm okay with that because the Turtles have grown to be such a huge IP in their own right that I can still get my fix of my version of the Turtles. Last week, I just finished reading The Last Ronin, the graphic novel. If you guys haven't read that and you're Turtles fans, it's awesome. It made me cry. Just a little bit, though. Just a little bit. It's a good story. It's a sad story, but you know, that's my grown-up adult Turtles, right? That have grown with me. So there are a lot of people who are going to be purists. I used to be one of those purists when Batman Begins came out, and I'm like, wait a minute, that's not how it happens. They borrowed this from this and this from this, and they're mixing stories. And I used to get so mad about comic book movies, and now I don't care, right? And it's the same with Turtles. They did their own thing, and I'm okay with it. Personally, I was disappointed, though, that the Turtles didn't really have their archetypes established yet. Michelangelo he had almost no personality in the movie. Like, he was fine. He behaved as like a normal kid. Same with Donatello. You know, you're used to him being like the tech whiz. Donatello does machines and so much more. But those two characters didn't really have their standout personalities. Raph was the angry one, but he wasn't really that angry. He was more just like boisterous. And Leonardo's personality was actually a little different, which makes sense because they're kids, or teenagers, excuse me. I'm trying to offend any teenagers out there by calling you kids. I'm doing my best to be objective and not upset anyone. Leonardo is trying to be the leader and trying to come into his own, but he has a lot of insecurities, and I think that's pretty cool. So ultimately, I was a little disappointed that they didn't have their archetypal personalities, but I'm hoping that in the sequel, and they've also announced a TV series, I'm hoping that in those future installments, they show the Turtles growing and sort of becoming who they are and their archetypal roles. I'm really excited to see where they go with the characters in that regard. Going back to the humor one more time, I said there wasn't a lot of adult humor, but by adult humor, I mean, you know, like sneaky references, things that are kind of slid under the table that kids don't get. But there were a lot of references in the movie, like pop culture references that were definitely aimed at an older generation and my generation, which felt out of place given that the Turtles themselves are portrayed by modern teenagers and they speak and act like modern teenagers. So at one point they're talking about, you know, Ferris Bueller and making references to Guy Fieri. And then the next minute they're they're talking about Riz and dancing to this whole like bacon, egg, and cheese thing. So they're acting like kids from today, from 2023, but their interests are things that Seth Rogen and I would be interested in. So that's a little weird to me. Same with some of the music too. There were a lot of songs that I recognized that are not really, modern of this time. There were a couple remixes and songs that I recognized. I'm rambling about this. Overall, I guess those are really my only complaints, like with the humor and the music and stuff, is that there was sort of a mix of time periods that didn't make a whole lot of sense to me, but it didn't really ruin the experience or break the movie, and my kids didn't notice, so, whatever. And I have to say, I did see in an interview where the kids, I keep saying kids, the teenagers that played the Turtles actually sat in the same room and recorded a lot of their dialogue, and they ended up kind of going off the cuff and improvising a few times, and their chemistry in the movie comes across beautifully. I really appreciated how a lot of the dialogue came across as very organic. They talked over each other and things, and they worked some of that into the movie, so it really feels like they are actual brothers having real conversations and not just reading scripts with the voices sort of overdubbed and mixed on top of each other. Like, no, you can tell that these are real people having fun playing these roles, and it translates to the screen. So watching the Turtles, hearing them talk to each other it was awesome. That stands out to me for sure as something that I don't see in movies a whole lot. So this is going to be a hot take, but by TMNT movie plot standards, okay, talking about all the Turtles movies over the years, this plot is probably my least favorite one of all of the movies, just because it's fairly uninspired and predictable. And I know I was praising it earlier, like saying it's a good feel-good movie, like with good lessons and stuff. But as an adult, there wasn't really anything in it for me. There's not any like twists or surprises or anything like that. The third Turtles movie, where they go back in time to Japan, had a much more interesting plot than this one. And a lot of people hate that movie. I don't hate that movie. I don't hate any Turtles movie, but that one's maybe my least. No. That's a topic for another time. What my least favorite Turtles movie is. Anyway, this movie does have some very valuable lessons for kids, regarding diversity and acceptance. So it's still cool. I'm not hating on it. Jackie Chan as Master Splinter is, in my opinion, the star of the show. I love seeing Ice Cube as Superfly, but Jackie Chan, I laughed almost every time he was on screen. The rat. Jackie Chan wasn't on screen. Anyway, Jackie Chan, his comedic timing is brilliant. It's so funny. I laughed every time he did anything, almost anything on screen. It was so good. So overall, from my perspective as an adult male critic, as a lifelong Turtles fan, I had pretty high expectations, especially given the art style, and for the most part, they were met. It was fun enough to keep my attention, and I appreciate the movie as eye candy more than anything else. I'll definitely want to watch it again, but it will be more focused on trying to find new hidden details in the visuals versus enjoyment of the story. And I think that's fair to say. I've said it a couple times, but I don't think I was the target audience for this movie. It gripped me enough to make me want to take my kids there, and I think ultimately that was the point, so they nailed it in that regard. But yeah, thankfully, I've still got the 1990 classic if I need to scratch the itch for a more adult-oriented plot. And I guess that is one more thing I need to point out, is that one thing I love about Turtles is that they're always able to balance humor with action and serious moments. And this movie doesn't really ever go too far into either of those. It's always kind of funny, and there's always an undertone of seriousness to it, but it never goes too far in either regard. And I appreciate more dynamics. It's not a bad movie by any means because of that. I just prefer a little more, okay, that part was fun. Now we need to come down and go into something a little more serious, but that's just me, right? You may think that that's awesome, and if you do, good on you. What am I doing? I'm a little nervous. Can you tell? No, I shouldn't be nervous. I'm talking about one of my favorite things on earth, Turtles, and I'm drinking one of my favorite things on earth, whiskey, Jack Daniels. I wonder if they'll sponsor me. Okay, so that wraps it up. It's a really good thing I didn't clap loud. That would have been loud in your eardrums. Let's give it a rating. So, dad perspective. As a dad, I would give it 4 out of 5 stars. Wait, let's not do stars. Stars is boring. What else should I need to come up with like a good rating system. I didn't think this through before I started recording. What else could I? Okay, as a dad, I give it 4 out of 5 pizza rolls. Huh? Yeah. No, that's dumb, isn't it? Whatever, I'm keeping it. I'm not changing it. As a critic, as an adult male what do I give this movie? I would say this movie, let's see, I need a different scale. So I did pizza rolls for the dad rating. Okay, I got it. Critic rating. This movie is about 70 proof. It's pretty strong. It's pretty strong, but it could have a little more bite to it. How about that? That's a whiskey joke. Not just whiskey, alcohol in general. I just noticed that every time I talk about whiskey and drinking, I get really close to the microphone. Now my microphone's gonna smell real good. And I use this microphone for work, so I gotta be careful. All right, guys, that's it. Thanks for watching my video. If you have any suggestions on things you might like me to review, leave a comment, let me know. Movies, children's books, video games, TV shows, food, anything that's sort of aimed at kids that a parent will have to subject themselves to as well. And I'll give you my honest opinion from both perspectives, which hopefully I think is useful and maybe a little entertaining. So, all right, guys, thanks again for watching. I'll see you next time. I'm out. Peace.